The digital sting of the photo seared into my memory, a brand of betrayal hotter than any fire. First-class seats, champagne flutes, and my own mother's beaming face, the caption screaming, "Living our best life." While back home, I was scrimping and saving, believing her lies about being broke, about not being able to afford to take me on vacation. The unfairness of it all was a physical weight, crushing the breath from my lungs. The injustice so profound it tasted like ash. They thought I wouldn't find out. They were so very wrong. If you have a mother who always told you that everything was fair, but secretly favored your siblings, subscribe now. The truth was, I'd always been the responsible one, the dependable daughter, the family's safety net. From the moment I got my first job in high school, a significant portion of my earnings went towards family expenses. It started small, contributing to groceries, helping with bills, but over the years, it had ballooned into a constant drain on my finances. My brother, Ethan, the golden child, was always excused. He was pursuing his passion, which conveniently never seemed to generate any actual income, while I, Savannah, was the pragmatic one, the provider, the one expected to sacrifice. Mom always had a way of making me feel guilty if I hesitated, a master manipulator weaving tales of financial hardship and familial obligation. She'd sigh dramatically, talk about the sacrifices she made for us, and somehow I'd always end up caving. This year, I'd been particularly excited about the prospect of a family vacation. I'd been working tirelessly, juggling 2 jobs to pay off student loans and still manage to contribute to the household. When I cautiously brought up the idea, Mom's face clouded over. "Sweetheart, you know we'd love to," she'd said, her voice laced with a practiced sorrow. "But things are just so tight right now. Maybe next year, when things are better." Ethan chimed in, echoing her sentiments with a casual shrug. "Yeah, Savannah, it's just not in the cards this year. Maybe you could use the time to pick up some extra shifts?" I swallowed my disappointment, forcing a smile. I understood, or so I thought. I buckled down, worked even harder, and silently resigned myself to another summer of staying home while watching everyone else's adventures unfold on social media. Then came the photos. A casual scroll through Instagram revealed the shocking truth, a curated highlight reel of their lavish vacation. They were in Italy, the Amalfi Coast shimmering behind them, cocktails in hand. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. The casual lie, the blatant disregard for my feelings, the cold calculation behind their deception, it all coalesced into a burning rage. I felt used, betrayed, and utterly foolish. All those sacrifices, all those hours of hard work, all that money poured into their pockets, and this was the thanks I received? A slap in the face delivered via social media. I replayed every conversation, every request for money, every guilt trip, and saw it all in a new, sickening light. The hurt was profound, a deep ache that settled in my bones. But beneath the hurt, something else was stirring, a cold, steely resolve. I'd been played for a fool for far too long. The role of the dutiful, sacrificing daughter was over. This wasn't just about a missed vacation. It was about a fundamental betrayal of trust, a blatant exploitation of my generosity. The person I trusted most was one of them. The digital sting of those photos wouldn't fade. Sleep became a battlefield, my mind replaying the images of their carefree joy against the backdrop of my own financial strain. Every bill I paid, every extra shift I worked, felt like a fresh wave of insult. I tried talking to Mom, attempting to broach the subject with a measured calm I didn't feel. "The vacation looked amazing," I started, carefully choosing my words. I wish I'd known you had the money. I could have planned to come." Her reaction was immediate, a wall of defensiveness erected in a heartbeat. "Savannah, don't start," she snapped, her voice sharper than I'd anticipated. "It was a last-minute thing. Ethan needed a break. He's been under so much stress. And besides," she added, her tone softening slightly, "you know how expensive those things are. We could barely afford it as it was." The lie hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. I wanted to scream, to unleash the torrent of anger and hurt that had been building inside me, but I bit my tongue. I wasn't ready yet. I needed information. I needed a plan. I feigned understanding, mumbled something about being happy they had a good time, and retreated to my room, the taste of ash still bitter on my tongue. Ethan, predictably, was even less receptive. When I tried to gently express my feelings, he dismissed them with a wave of his hand. "Come on, Savannah, don't be like that," he said, his eyes glued to his phone. "It's not our fault you're always working. You need to learn to relax and enjoy life." His words were like a knife twisting in the wound. They saw my hard work not as a sacrifice for the family, but as a personal failing, a character flaw. The injustice of it all was almost unbearable. I started meticulously tracking every expense, every contribution I made to the household, creating a detailed spreadsheet that laid bare the extent of my financial support. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 5 years, I had contributed over 70% of the household income. 70%. And they had the audacity to lie to my face, to parade their extravagance on social media, while I struggled to make ends meet. The weight of it pressed down on me, a crushing burden that threatened to suffocate me. I started losing weight, my appetite vanishing along with my trust. Sleepless nights were filled with replays of their betrayal, each image a fresh stab of pain. My work suffered, my relationships strained. I was becoming a shell of my former self, consumed by anger and resentment. I knew I couldn't continue down this path. I needed to find a way to reclaim my life, to extract myself from this toxic dynamic. But how? They had all the power, all the control. They held the purse strings, manipulated my emotions, and gaslit me into believing I was responsible for their well-being. I felt trapped, suffocated, like a bird caught in a cage. But even in the darkest of moments, a flicker of hope remained, a tiny spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. I wouldn't let them break me. I would find a way to turn the tables, to expose their lies and reclaim my life. The plan was starting to form, slowly, carefully, like a seed germinating in the darkness. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. I would make them pay for what they had done. They thought they had won. They thought I was defeated. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The weight of their deception felt like a physical shackle, dragging me down into an abyss of despair. Each morning, I woke with a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach, the memory of their sun-drenched smiles a constant, unwelcome companion. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, every corner whispering reminders of their betrayal. I found myself avoiding them, retreating into the confines of my room, seeking refuge in the silence. But even there, the echoes of their laughter, their casual lies, their blatant disregard for my feelings pursued me relentlessly. I stopped eating regularly, the joy of food replaced by a dull ache of resentment. My clothes hung loosely on my frame, a stark testament to my dwindling spirit. Sleep offered no escape, my dreams haunted by grotesque parodies of their vacation, their faces twisted into mocking grins as they tossed wads of cash into a bottomless pit. My grades began to slip, my focus shattered by the constant internal turmoil. I was failing, not just academically, but as a person. The vibrant, optimistic girl I once was slowly fading away, replaced by a hollow, embittered shell. I felt isolated, alone in my pain. I tried confiding in a few friends, but they couldn't understand the depth of my betrayal. They offered platitudes about forgiveness and moving on, but their words felt empty and meaningless. They hadn't experienced the sting of being so profoundly deceived by the people they loved most. They didn't know what it was like to have their generosity weaponized against them. Their well-meaning advice only served to amplify my sense of isolation. I started questioning everything, doubting my own judgment, wondering if I had somehow brought this upon myself. Maybe I was too trusting, too naive, too willing to sacrifice my own happiness for others. Maybe I deserved to be treated this way. The insidious tendrils of self-doubt wrapped themselves around my heart, slowly constricting my spirit. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of resentment and despair. One evening, after a particularly brutal argument with my mother about household expenses, I found myself standing on the edge of a bridge, the churning water below a dark, tempting abyss. The weight of my pain felt unbearable, the thought of ending it all a fleeting moment of dark solace. The world would be better off without me, I reasoned. I was nothing but a burden, a drain on their resources. My life had no value, no purpose. But as I stood there, teetering on the brink, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. A memory surfaced, a childhood recollection of my grandmother, a woman of immense strength and resilience, who had overcome countless hardships with unwavering determination. She had always told me, "Savannah, never let anyone break your spirit. You are stronger than you think." Her words echoed in my mind, a lifeline in the darkness. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped back from the edge. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them extinguish the flame of hope that still flickered within me. I would find a way to reclaim my life, to extract myself from their toxic influence. The darkness receded slightly, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. The tears still flowed, but now they were tears of anger, not despair. I was done being the victim. It was time to become the architect of my own destiny. I walked back home, my steps slow but deliberate, a newfound sense of purpose hardening my gaze. I went straight to my room, opened my laptop, and began to research. I needed information, resources, a plan. The transformation had begun. The naive, trusting daughter was gone. In her place stood a woman with a burning desire for justice, a woman who would stop at nothing to reclaim her life and expose the truth. They thought they had broken me. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The first step was information. I needed to understand the full extent of their deception, to uncover the hidden pathways of their financial trickery. I started by meticulously documenting every transaction, every expense, every contribution I had made to the household over the past 5 years. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts. I gathered everything I could find, meticulously organizing the data into a comprehensive spreadsheet. The numbers were staggering, a stark indictment of their manipulation. I discovered hidden accounts, unexplained withdrawals, and a pattern of lavish spending that directly contradicted their claims of financial hardship. They weren't just taking advantage of me. They were actively deceiving me, diverting funds for their own personal gain while I struggled to make ends meet. The discovery fueled my anger, hardening my resolve. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. They would simply deny everything, gaslight me into doubting my own sanity. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would expose their lies and hold them accountable for their actions. So I began to gather more. I started subtly recording our conversations, using my phone to capture their words, their justifications, their carefully constructed web of deceit. It was risky, I knew, but I was careful to conceal the device, to act as if nothing had changed. I smiled. I played their game, but I was recording. Each recording was a piece of the puzzle, a thread in the tapestry of their betrayal. I researched the laws in my state, familiarizing myself with the regulations regarding recording conversations. I learned about the one-party consent rule, which allowed me to legally record conversations as long as I was a participant. I made sure to always be present during the recordings, to actively engage in the conversations, to avoid any potential legal complications down the line. My biggest fear was being discovered. I knew that if they found out what I was doing, they would stop at nothing to silence me, to protect their secrets. I became hypervigilant, constantly scanning my surroundings, listening for any sign of suspicion. I kept my laptop locked and password protected, my phone hidden from view. I even started clearing my browsing history and deleting any incriminating files on a regular basis. It was exhausting, living in a constant state of paranoia, but I knew it was necessary. The stakes were too high to take any chances. One evening, as I was meticulously reviewing my financial records, I stumbled upon a particularly damning piece of evidence: a series of large, unexplained transfers from my mother's account to an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands. The transfers coincided with the dates of their lavish vacations, the trips they had claimed they couldn't afford. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't just lying about their finances. They were actively hiding their wealth, shielding it from scrutiny, likely avoiding taxes. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a family matter. It was a potential crime. I knew I had to proceed with caution. If I exposed their actions, they could face serious legal consequences. I consulted with a lawyer, a friend of a friend who specialized in financial crimes. I showed him the evidence I had gathered, the spreadsheets, the recordings, the bank statements. He was impressed by my meticulousness, by the sheer volume of evidence I had compiled. He confirmed my suspicions. Their actions were likely illegal, a clear case of tax evasion and fraud. He advised me to contact the authorities, to report their crimes to the IRS. But I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that step. Exposing them to the authorities would have far-reaching consequences, not just for them, but for our entire family. It would be a messy public affair, a scandal that would forever stain our reputation. I needed time to think, to weigh the pros and cons, to decide what was the right course of action. In the meantime, I continued to gather evidence, to build my case, to prepare for whatever decision I ultimately made. I knew that the truth would eventually come out. It was just a matter of time. The anticipation was a coiled spring inside me, a mix of dread and exhilaration. I knew the confrontation was coming, the moment when I would finally expose their lies and reclaim my life. I could almost taste it, the sweet satisfaction of justice, the bitter sting of their defeat. But I also knew that it wouldn't be easy. They would fight back. They would deny everything. They would try to manipulate me into silence. I had to be prepared, to anticipate their every move, to have a plan for every eventuality. I spent hours rehearsing my arguments, practicing my delivery, visualizing the scene in my mind. I imagined their faces when I revealed the truth, the shock, the disbelief, the dawning realization that they had been caught. I imagined their desperate attempts to salvage the situation, their lies, their pleas, their threats. And I imagined myself standing firm, unyielding, refusing to be swayed by their manipulations. I knew that the key to success was to remain calm and collected, to present my evidence in a clear and concise manner, to avoid getting drawn into emotional arguments. I had to stick to the facts, to let the evidence speak for itself. I also knew that I couldn't do this alone. I needed support, allies who would stand by me, who would witness the truth and hold them accountable. I confided in a few trusted friends, explaining the situation, showing them the evidence I had gathered. They were shocked and appalled by what I had uncovered. They offered their unwavering support, promising to be there for me every step of the way. Their support gave me strength, bolstering my confidence, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this fight. The day of the confrontation was fast approaching. I could feel it in the air, a palpable sense of tension, a growing sense of anticipation. I was ready. I had a plan. I had the evidence. And I had the support I needed to finally expose the truth and reclaim my life. They thought they had broken me. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I discovered the truth about their charity. They paraded themselves as philanthropists, donating to various organizations, attending galas, and posting photos on social media, all in the name of goodwill. But the reality was far more sinister. The charity was a sham, a front for laundering their ill-gotten gains, a way to funnel money offshore and evade taxes. I found the documents buried deep within my mother's computer. Articles of incorporation, bank statements, donation receipts, all meticulously crafted to create the illusion of legitimacy. But the numbers didn't add up. The donations they claimed to have made were significantly less than the funds they had transferred to the charity's account. The difference, I suspected, was being siphoned off for their own personal use. This was it, the smoking gun, the evidence that would not only expose their financial trickery, but also their hypocrisy, their false pretense of morality. It was time to set the trap. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. They would simply deny everything, destroy the evidence, and try to silence me. I needed to lure them into a situation where they couldn't escape, where their lives would be exposed for all to see. I decided to stage a family meeting, a seemingly innocent gathering to discuss our financial situation. I would act concerned, expressing my worries about our future, my desire to find ways to save money and improve our financial stability. I would suggest that we review our expenses, our investments, our charitable donations, all in the name of transparency and accountability. They would see it as an opportunity to reinforce their narrative, to portray themselves as responsible stewards of our finances, to further manipulate me into believing their lies. But in reality, it would be a trap, a carefully orchestrated scheme to expose their deception. I chose the date carefully, a day when several family friends and relatives would be visiting, people who knew us well, people whose opinions they valued. I wanted an audience, witnesses who would see the truth and hold them accountable. I prepared the setting meticulously, arranging the seating, setting up a projector, and preparing a presentation. The presentation was a masterpiece of deception, a carefully crafted narrative that appeared to support their claims but contained hidden clues, subtle inconsistencies that would expose their lies. I even included a section on their charity, praising their generosity, highlighting their commitment to philanthropy, all while knowing that the truth was far more sinister. The day arrived, a day filled with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. I woke early, my stomach churning with anxiety, my mind racing with possibilities. I went through my presentation one last time, rehearsing my lines, anticipating their reactions. I knew that this was it, the moment of truth. There was no turning back. As the guests began to arrive, I greeted them with a smile, acting as if nothing was amiss. My parents, oblivious to my plan, seemed relaxed, confident, basking in the attention of their friends and relatives. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The meeting began as planned, with polite conversation, casual banter, and the usual family pleasantries. I waited for the right moment, for the atmosphere to be just right, before launching my attack. After about an hour, I cleared my throat and announced that I had prepared a presentation to discuss our financial situation. My parents exchanged a knowing glance, a smug smile playing on their lips. They thought they had me right where they wanted me. Little did they know, they were the ones who were about to be exposed. I dimmed the lights and started the presentation, narrating the story of our family finances, highlighting the sacrifices I had made, the contributions I had given. I praised their leadership, their guidance, their financial acumen, all while knowing that it was all a lie. As I progressed through the presentation, I subtly introduced the inconsistencies, the hidden clues, the subtle hints that would expose their deception. I pointed out the unexplained expenses, the suspicious withdrawals, the discrepancies in their financial statements. At first, they dismissed my concerns, attributing the discrepancies to accounting errors, to simple mistakes. But as I continued to press them, as I presented more and more evidence, their confidence began to waver. Their smiles faded, replaced by a look of growing unease. I could see the panic in their eyes, the dawning realization that they had been caught. When I reached the section on their charity, I paused, taking a deep breath before revealing the truth. I presented the evidence I had gathered, the bank statements, the donation receipts, the articles of incorporation, all meticulously organized to expose their scheme. I pointed out the discrepancies between the donations they claimed to have made and the funds they had transferred to the charity's account. I revealed the offshore bank accounts, the hidden transfers, the likely tax evasion. The room fell silent. Everyone was staring at them, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and disgust. My parents were speechless, their faces ashen, their eyes wide with terror. They knew they had been caught. Their carefully constructed world of lies was crumbling around them. It was time for the final blow. I had saved the most damning piece of evidence for last, a video recording of a conversation I had with my mother in which she confessed to the entire scheme, admitting to laundering money through the charity, evading taxes, and deceiving me for years. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, her words dripping with deceit, her confession echoing through the silence. I watched their faces as they listened to her words, their expressions a mixture of horror and despair. The video ended. The room remained silent for a moment, before erupting into chaos. The guests began to argue, to shout, to accuse. My parents tried to defend themselves, to deny the evidence, but it was no use. The truth was out. Their lies had been exposed, and their world was about to come crashing down. "How could you?" my father said, looking directly at my mom. "How could you?" My father's words hung in the air, directed at my mother, but encompassing both of them. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste, broken only by the ragged breaths of my parents and the murmurs of the stunned guests. My mother, finally finding her voice, launched into a tirade of denials, claiming the video was doctored, that I was twisting the truth, that she would never do such a thing. But her words rang hollow, lost in the face of the overwhelming evidence. My father, on the other hand, seemed to deflate before my very eyes. The color drained from his face, his shoulders slumped, and he stared at the floor as if searching for an escape route. I watched them crumple, their carefully constructed facade of wealth and respectability dissolving into a pile of lies and deceit. The family, friends, and relatives, initially shocked into silence, began to voice their outrage, their disappointment, their sense of betrayal. Accusations flew, questions were demanded, and the room descended into chaos. I stood back, observing the scene with a detached sense of satisfaction. The truth was out, their secrets exposed, and their world was collapsing around them. It was exactly as I had planned. The following days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media inquiries, and family drama. The IRS launched an investigation into their finances, uncovering a web of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and fraudulent deductions. The charity was shut down, its assets seized, and its reputation tarnished beyond repair. My parents were facing serious charges, including tax evasion, fraud, and money laundering. Their lawyers advised them to settle, to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, but they refused, clinging to the hope that they could somehow salvage the situation. The media, of course, had a field day with the story, publishing articles, airing news segments, and broadcasting their dirty laundry for the entire world to see. Their names were mud, their reputations ruined, and their social circle evaporated overnight. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, invitations dried up, and they became pariahs in their own community. But the real devastation was within the family. My siblings, initially skeptical of my claims, were forced to confront the truth, to acknowledge the extent of their parents' deception. They were angry, hurt, and confused, struggling to reconcile the image they had of their parents with the reality of their actions. The family bonds, once seemingly unbreakable, were now strained to the breaking point. My relationship with my parents was irrevocably damaged. The trust was gone, the respect was shattered, and the love, if it ever existed, had turned to ashes. I knew that there was no going back, that we would never be a family again. And while a part of me mourned that loss, another part of me felt a sense of liberation. I was finally free from their control, their manipulation, their lies. I had reclaimed my life, my independence, and my peace of mind. In the end, my parents were convicted of multiple felonies and sentenced to several years in prison. They lost their wealth, their status, and their freedom. Their lives were ruined, their reputations destroyed, and their family torn apart. As I sat in the courtroom, listening to the judge pronounce their sentence, I felt a sense of closure, a sense of justice served. They had taken advantage of me. They had lied to me. They had betrayed me. And now, they were paying the price. They lost everything. I just smiled. Looking back, I often reflect on the events that led me to that courtroom, to that moment of triumph. I wonder if I could have chosen a different path, if I could have found a way to resolve the situation without resorting to such drastic measures. But the truth is, I don't think I could have. They had left me with no other choice. They had pushed me too far, they had underestimated my resolve, and they had sealed their own fate. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a way of reclaiming power, of restoring balance, of ensuring that justice is served. It's not about inflicting pain or seeking retribution. It's about protecting yourself, your loved ones, and your values. It's about standing up to bullies, exposing corruption, and fighting for what's right. And sometimes, the only way to achieve those goals is through revenge. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.